Hello and welcome to the Queen of Hearts Astrology page. Today I am going to take you through a journey about one of my favourite types of astrology, which is lesser known, and it's super exciting. So the name of it is Horary Astrology, and this type of astrology is all about answering your really important questions. So have a think about it. What's been on your mind lately? What's been troubling you? Do you have to make a big decision? Have you lost something that's really important to you? Are you wondering whether or not you might get back together with your ex? Are you considering moving overseas? Perhaps you want to make a sizable investment this year, or maybe sell your house. These are some ideas of very useful horary questions, and you can really ask a horary question about virtually anything, providing it is a burning hot question. So it has to be super important to you. It's not okay to ask just these chuck away rah-rah kind of questions. They have to be important, okay, because we're asking the universe, okay. It's a type of astrology which is known as judicial, okay. So I am effectively your intermediate between your question and the universe. And so when you craft your question, and if you need help getting very clear on what it is you're asking, I'm happy to work with you to do that. But when we get your question and you're clear on what you want to know, you give that to me, and then I ask that question. And then the chart I provide you with from that moment that I cast the chart is indicative of the answer to the question. It shows the surrounding events, situations, people in answer to the question. So it helps you because it provides you with information that you otherwise might not have, okay? A lot of the things are difficult to see with your own eyes, especially if you're already in the situation. So horary is very interesting and helpful branch of astrology because it gives us more information so we can make wiser choices and sometimes actually divert or change our path if it looks like the road we're going down is not working too well. Now, I sometimes ask these questions myself, and I have definitely ignored the advice before. And I have learnt the hard way. So I'm trying to follow the outcomes and, you know, what the charts are saying. But it is really, it's really helpful. And I do suggest if you do a horary chart that you're really ready to ask that question. Okay, these are not light and fluffy charts necessarily. So you really have to be ready for the answers, ready for the information that comes, because if you don't want to know the answer, it's best not to ask the question with this type of astrology. But you can ask, yeah, about literally anything. Now, I will share with you an example that when I was about to get flooded, I was living up in the Northern Rivers. Our garden was full of water, and I was wondering if we were likely to flood. Now, this chart is a big red flag chart that says it looks pretty likely you're going to flood. So I'm going to share with you how I interpret this in a nutshell. And then I'm going to show you another chart which shows the flood is actually on the doorstep, which was cast the next day. So this is quite interesting. But as you can see from this little panel here on the right, there's a lot of different questions that you could ask. You know, will moving north be good? Now, that was my horary question, and it was quite a stark chart that I chose to ignore. And I had a really challenging trip, but I also did learn a lot. So yeah, you can definitely ignore the charts, but you will at least get the information about what is likely to come your way. So other questions people have asked me, things about burnout, about certain medical questions like coming off medication, or, you know, someone wanted to know if they would be okay. In terms of that, you can do medical horary charts. So things like, what is my illness, or what is wrong with me, if you've got some kind of like strange symptom that you don't know what it is. Because I also do medical astrology. Things like, yeah, will we be happy living together? Will we enter into a romantic relationship? There's so many. Legal trouble, like people ask all kinds of questions about courses, moving, buying businesses, etc. So yeah, okay, so let's just go through this flood chart. Now, first thing first, I just couldn't help but notice this grouping of planets up here on the MC and in the 10th house. Now, the 10th house is what overhangs the question. We've got a bunch of water right here. Okay, this is Pisces, and Jupiter is ruling the 10th house. Jupiter indicates plentiful, lots of, and it's co-present with Neptune, which says, what does it say? It looks ominous as far as a flood goes. It looks like, yeah, there's going to be plenty of water, and it just rained and rained and rained. Now, the other thing we look at in horary is the moon. It's super important because the moon is the bringer of events. It shows the changing circumstances and things in terms of what's likely to happen next. Now, we see a few things here. The moon, firstly, is not in a beneficial sign. Okay, the moon is in its sign of detriment. It doesn't traditionally like being Capricorn, which indicates not good things. Start just off the cuff. Okay, it indicates conditions being problematic straight away, or there being less strength available to the conditions. Now, the moon's applying to Venus, and it's in the 8th house. Now, Venus is generally a good planet, but it is compromised. And we can see that Venus actually represents me, because Venus is ruler of the 1st house, and I'm in the 8th house with the moon applying to me. Now, this looks like, you know, in a short while, the negative events are likely to come my way. And the 8th house does relate to mental anguish, turmoil. And you can see that I'm actually conjunct with Mars and also Pluto. Now, these two planets are quite hardcore. They don't tend to bring light and fluffy things. They can be sharp. They can be the bringers of destruction. So I'm moving towards this, and the moon is also heralding it, or like, you know, calling it forward. And all of these planets are under the rulership of Saturn. Saturn is in Aquarius, which is the water bearer, which is not great. And Venus is ruling the 12th house, which is connected to misfortune. It's connected to hidden enemies and also things like floods. And Venus is here. So we can see the moon moving toward it in the 8th house of anguish. Yeah, not looking good. Now, Saturn traditionally was also connected to flooding, especially in a water, well, it's not a water sign, but in the sign of the water bearer, because Aquarius does have connections to water. So all in all, this is just not looking good. We also see the North Node quite close to Algol, which is a very malevolent fixed star. So we don't like the look of that. And that's really close to the ascendant degree as well. So that rings alarm bells. Now, I will show you. Oh, and the other thing I wanted to mention here is that the 4th house represents the home, okay? And the ruler of the 4th is Mercury. We're in Aquarius, again, remember the sign of the water bearer, and it's applying to Saturn, ruler of all of this misfortune in the 8th house. And remember, Saturn's connected to flooding, so don't like it. Now, the next morning, it's strange. So that day when I was looking at this chart, I spent 5 hours trying to use buckets to get the water out of the garden. And then the following day, I woke up really early, and I had a feeling, shit, this is the day it's going to happen. But look at this. I'm just going to show you these side by side, because it'll be easier for your eyes to actually see. So these are the two flood charts, one the day before that I just showed you, and then the one from day after. Okay, so will we flood today? Okay, just a sec. Okay. The one on the left is the one we've just explored. The one on the right is the chart of the next day. Okay, so this right-hand chart is the chart of the day that we well and truly flooded. But the thing I want to show you that's super interesting and also concerning is we can see that this bunch of planets, which spoke to the incredible amount of water overhanging the problem, these planets all come down to the 1st house, which is indicative of the moment the question's asked. It's indicative of my situation at the time of the question. And we can see they're in the 1st house. That this means showtime. This means, yes, we're flooding. And we did. Actually, shortly after that, the house was flooding, and I had to, yes, start trying to rescue whatever I could from the house. So you can see just the movement of these three down to here. It really means business time, unfortunately. Now, the other thing that's really notable, the moon in this one day period has moved all the way through this. It's moved through all of these two malefics, and it's entered to 0 degrees of Aquarius. Now, remember, it's the water bearer again, connected to flooding, but not just that. It is separating from Pluto and moving into star to apply to Mercury, Saturn. Now, this is not quite on the cusp of the 12th, but it's moving there. And the 12th house cusp brings misfortune. And the other thing that I wanted to show you, which is certainly problematic, is the ruler of the 4th house indicating the home itself. Mercury, which is in the 12th house. Yeah, this is really not a good place to see that Mercury, especially applying to Saturn in the sign of the water bearer. So that is really concerning. The 12th house has to do with errors. It has to do with self-undoing, and sometimes things that we don't see, things that could be hidden. I mean, we didn't really see it. We saw it coming, but we didn't see it coming. It was sort of like, oh wow, it's happening now. So it's sort of just outside of vision, because the ascendant is where we can see, but because we can't cast any of our traditional aspects into here, what's going on is just sort of outside of our view. So this is not a good chart either. And it says, yes, we're definitely going to flood. So I'm going to stop sharing this, and then I'm going to show you how I'll cast a new horary, just so you can see how I do it from scratch. Okay, I'm going to stop share, and then I'll reshare, so you can get a really clear idea. Okay, here we are. All right, so this is a chart. I've cast it just for right now, this very moment. Now, this chart would answer any question that you had. That if you asked me the question and I cast the chart at this very moment, this chart would become the basis of your answer. And through my interpretation and the systems that I use, I would come back to you with a delineation as to what my judgment was. And so the way we do it, you contact me, you let me know what your question is. I cast that chart in my own time. And then I schedule a time to have about a half an hour chat with you. Now, I spend about half an hour myself workshopping it and getting my judgment very clear. And then I usually spend, half an hour and more if need be with you, just taking you through the findings of the chart. So, yeah, it's super interesting. And each of these different segments, which are called houses, this is first house, second house, third house, fourth house, so on. There's 12 in total. Each of these have different meanings. And so we start to use the house meanings to give us information about certain topics. So say, for example, your question might have been about a friend. We would use the 11th house in this chart. And you're like, well, there's no planets in there. Like, what are you doing? Well, we would use the ruler. So the moon rules the 11th house and the moon is in the first house. So if this chart was saying something like, will my friend, forgive me or something? Say that was your question. If you had the ruler of the 11th house in the first house, that indicates that friend is coming to you. Okay, they're in place. They're in your house. So that is already like something that looks relatively positive. Now, the other thing we'd be looking for, though, to get a really strong yes, is for you. Now, if you are asking this question about your friend, you'd be represented by the first house, which represents the person asking the question. Now, this is Libra and the ruler is Venus. So we would be looking and saying, okay, does the moon come together with Venus? And the answer is no, actually it doesn't. But the emplacement of the 11th house ruler in the first is still indicative of like that looks relatively possible. There's a lot more to it, but this is just a quick kind of introduction. Now, say this chart was about, say, a love relationship. If you wanted to know whether you'll get together with that person. Now, the partner is represented by the 7th house, any planets in it, as well as the ruler. Now, this is Aries on the cusp. Okay, so therefore Mars is the ruler of that 7th house. Now, Mars is in the 10th. So the partner in this chart is actually in the radical 10th house, which indicates professional work or activities that they're doing, like ways they're spending their time, which might be, they could be a workaholic, they might be at work, like maybe this is like, will we get back together? And maybe they're just workaholic, you know, maybe that's what this is showing. And again, we'll be looking to see, does Venus make an aspect to Mars, or Mars make an aspect to Venus? Well, we know that Venus is a faster moving planet, so we're looking at it this way, but we are looking for connections. Now, in this chart, we don't see them coming together either, but let's see what else we can see. Yeah, that's interesting. We see a lot of action going on in this 7th house, though. Now, these additional planets, if this was a relationship question, these could represent other people, potentially. Other people in this person's life, perhaps, you know, depends. So there's lots of ways that these charts play out. Say this was a question about study. Okay, you wanted to know about study. We would take Mercury, who rules the 9th house. Say you wanted to do a, I don't know, say an astrology course. We might use Mercury, who rules the 9th house. Now, Mercury is here in the 7th house, and it's in Taurus, and we would start to look at the qualities of those planets to be descriptors, to give us information about the strength of, you know, the course. Like, is it a good course? Is it well put together? We can find more information about whether things are of a high quality, whether things are likely to sell for a high price. So it's super interesting. If you have a curious mind and you have a lot of questions, you should check out my website, because I have got a number of different options. I'm just going to stop sharing and tell you the rest. So on my website, which is queenofheartsastrology.com, I do have a services page. On there, you can see the Horary question chart available, but there's also packs where you can buy 3 charts at a time. Now, they're valid for, you know, virtually as long as you need. Just whenever you have a burning question, you know, you can keep it in the bank, and then you can just call me and say, hey, I've got another question. Can you cast that for me? So please feel free to ask me any questions you have about this type of astrology. It is one of my favorites. I have used it to find, to find rings, to find people's pets, and used it to help people to get greater clarity in making really important decisions. And it is just so kooky when they call me up and they said, oh, you know, you told me that this guy would call me, and he called me on the day you told me he would. There's lots of methods we use, but we look at the planets coming together and the degree range, and there's a whole sort of method to this. So if you're interested to learn more, reach out to me, ask me any questions, and feel free to book yourself in for a Horary session. Thanks very much.